Hello, everybody. This week will mark week 6 of movie film reviews. And this week we'll be focusing on the movie Citizen Kane. Now, this week's movie is a black and white film, and you can purchase it on Amazon for rent for $3.79. Before we start the review, I just wanted to point out that this movie is based on a real person, and it is based on William Randolph Hearst, and he was elected the U.S. president 2 times. The movie is based on his life and his life and his personal life. For example, he actually did run a newspaper just like Citizen Foster Kane. And something to point out in the movie is that it has an omniscient narrative style, meaning the narrative of the movie wasn't like someone's point of view or him speaking himself. It was actually a neutral reporter that Wells used and to picture Kane's life without actually featuring Kane's own perspective. Yes, I wrote notes this week because this movie was in black and white, and I've actually never seen a black and white film, and I wanted to capture this movie in a way that would make sense to the younger generation. So, the whole movie was really based on Kane's last words, which was Rosebud. And everyone in this movie, not everyone in this movie, but the majority of the reporters and the interviewers of the movie were trying to figure out why he said Rosebud as his last words. And before I get to what Rosebud is, I want to point out something that the setting of the movie, it was everywhere. The settings, the props, it really looked like a authentic 1941 in black and white movie. They portrayed this perfectly. And what I mean by that is the filmmakers used the correct error. There was a scene in the movie that really stood out to me while watching it, was the ladies dancing at this party for Kane, this musical number that they did, and the error was right after the Great Depression, or like in the 1930s, and they had these little dresses on, which I thought were super cool. I know that's not my opinion. I'm not supposed to give my opinion, but I just had to point that out, that the props and everything that they used for the timeline of the movie, and that's another thing, the timeline switches from 1929, when the Great Depression hit, to all the way back to when Kane was a child, to Kane in the middle of his life when he's like in his 20s, like 25-ish. So the narrative of that moved very quickly. We went back from, first we started off with his death, then we started to run through his life a little bit. I also want to point out the technique that they used in this movie. They used a lot of series shots limited by dissolves, which means that they shot up a whole bunch of film, and the film, it's hard to explain, but the technique that created the external perspective of the narrative style, which was the deep focus and the long takes. Something to point out, which was when Kane was Thrasher. Okay, to explain this, I have to explain part of the movie. Thrasher was this man that came and took him from his parents because his parents were in some kind of divorce, some kind of contract with Thrasher or something. And so Thrasher came and took Kane as a child and raised him, which made him very wealthy. And in these shots, you can kind of see the deep focus of these shots because they were so well in with the characters that you can tell. And something else I wanted to point out was the narrative style was objective, and Kane was a particular person. He ran for president in this movie. And he was also a liberal. So he was, in the movie, he was for the people, for the working people. Back then, that's what liberal meant, for the working people. And he never got elected. And his quest for power, not only with the newsletter, but among other things in this movie, really mark the movie. And in the beginning of the movie, it parallels the ending, recreating a sense of mystery about who Kane was as a person. Now I'm going to go back to Rosebud, because Rosebud, again, was the whole source of this movie, and the reporter trying to figure out why that was his last words. Rosebud was, I'm not going to tell you what it was, because that'll kind of ruin the movie for you. But I'm going to tell you what Rosebud was supposed to symbolize. See, in my eyes, while watching the movie, Rosebud was a symbolization of his childhood before he got taken away from everything that he had already knew. It was a symbolization of joy. It was a symbolization of a time in Kane's life where he felt peace. And in the movie, they portrayed Rosebud as something that he had lost, or something that he could never get back, or something that he could never reach. But to me, the movie was supposed to symbolize Rosebud was a part of him personally, like in his personal life, that I don't think anybody, even his two wives, Susan and Emily, really never even knew. Now, Susan was his mistress, and Emily was his first wife, which he had a kid with. In the movie, Emily had left him not because of the relationship that he had with Susan, but because some kind of contract. Again, I don't want to spoil anything, but Emily was a worker at a music shop when they first met. And he asked her, well, what do you want to do? And she said, well, I kind of want to sing. But that was for her mom. not for her. She didn't really want to sing. So when they got married, Kane built her this whole opera. Literally built her an opera building so that she could sing opera. But by the end of it, she didn't want to do it anymore because she felt like Kane didn't love her for her. And Susan felt like Kane didn't love her at all. He only wanted to be loved, not love her. He loved that he was being loved. He loved the power of having her as her loving him, and he didn't want to express or didn't know how to express any of those feelings back to her. And so she essentially left him because she didn't want to sing anymore. She didn't want to do this anymore, especially with all the tabloids and all the reporters were not very nice about her singing, and she just didn't want to. And he built this whole opera building for her, and she was just like, I don't want to do this. This is not what I want to do. Something to point out about Citizen Kane is the movie, the storyline manipulates, the plot manipulates the storyline. And what I mean by that is, you kind of go through Kane's life around the plot, around the storyline. So you never, the storyline is so small in the movie because it's portraying Kane's life. In 1929, Kane's newspaper closes in the Great Depression. And that's well within his 60s, well within his years of having this paper. It is said that Foster Kane helped change the world. Now, we could argue that, but before I let you go, something that I want to point out is, and there's a couple scenes in the movies that I have written down, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to get through these the way that I want to, but the scene when Minister Kane had a cable, and it was just a little paper, and I'm guessing cable back then meant a letter or something, and it was from Paris, France, and he wants to buy the world's biggest diamond. But what the dude said right after that one dude was reading the paper, he said he doesn't just want to buy the diamonds. He's collecting someone who's collecting diamonds. That stood out to me, and I don't know why it stood out to me. But I feel like that was a very important part of the movie. There was a couple stock cuts in the scenes of Citizen Kane. The sudden appearance of the screeching cockatoo and the abrupt beginning of the news reel. There were also stylistic techniques to create the believable impression that Kane was a historical figure, such as the newsletter, or him running for president, or him being able to literally build an opera building in her name. Not in her name, but in her honor. And that was the distressing of the footage and the different film stocks. Okay, now, done with the notes. So before I end all of this, there is something else I really want to point out. The music, because this is a black and white 1941 film. The music in the background had me stressing out in some of the moments that were portrayed when Kane is at the newsletter, and this dude is coming to tell him, or coming to tell this person, hey, I'm going to live in this building, and there's so much chaos going on, hey, I'm going to live here for as long as I need. And there's so much chaos going on, and the music just kept building and building and building and building. But the music represents the relationships and the nature of Kane's life. What I wrote down was the music goes up as the chaos in the room goes up. And that didn't just happen once, though. That happened multiple times throughout this film. The film overall the production was very well put together for a 1941 black and white film. And it was just overall very good production, very good filming. That's all I'm going to leave you with. Again, I'm not going to tell you what Rosebud is, but pay very close attention to the very end of the movie, and you will know what Rosebud was meant to symbolize. I will see you all next week. I hope you all have a good day. And remember, you can buy Citizen Kane and watch Citizen Kane on Amazon Prime for $3.79 for rent. Y'all have a blessed day.